focusing on women in Islam, inshallah. Before that, we will have a little briefing about Islam in general. It will be a video show. Thank you.
My name is Adaya Kendall, and the Muslim Student Association and I would like to welcome you to tonight's presentation. We're really happy that y'all have decided to spend your evening with us, and we're hoping that tonight's presentation is going to do something in the way of breaking down some of the stereotypes that exist about Muslim women. In anticipation of y'all's questions, some slips of paper have been placed out on the chairs so that y'all can write down any questions that you have. And there are some gentlemen who are around who will be happy to take your questions and bring them up. And at the end of the presentation, we're going to try to sort of summarize them by theme and ask as many questions as we can. We're going to try to get to everybody, but if we can't, if y'all really would like to have your questions answered, we're going to try to get in touch with people. So if you want to have your question answered, go ahead and put down your name and some way of contacting you, your phone number or your email address or something like that, and someone will get back with you after tonight's presentation to answer your question. I remember the first time that I ever saw a Muslim woman, and it was actually here at ODU when I was an undergraduate. And I was walking through Web Center, and there was a large table that was spread out with like Islamic information, and there was this Muslim woman standing at the table, and she was wearing this very long robe with this very large head cover. And my first instinct when I saw her was I felt so sorry for her. It was just an incredibly intense degree of sympathy that I had for this woman. And the next feeling that I had for her, or the next thought that I had when I saw this woman, was that she looked really happy. And I think even now that that's really interesting, that I had two very, very different and very distinct responses to seeing a Muslim woman in person, because I don't recall ever seeing one before then. At the time when this happened to me, and I later went back and got some of the information that was available on the table and read it, and I didn't become a Muslim then, but at the time when this happened, I wasn't aware of really the very large number of Americans that accept Islam every year. There's an estimate of about 20,000 Americans since the mid-1990s have accepted Islam. And one of the things that I think is most interesting is that out of those thousands of Americans that accept Islam as their religion, as their way of living, a whole lot of them are women. I mean, the most recent statistics that I read are that out of the 20,000 people that converted in the year 2000, almost 3/4 of them who accepted Islam were women. And I just think that's really interesting, because the vision that is oftentimes presented to us about Muslim women, at least in our media, is this very oppressed, very downtrodden woman who's oppressed by her clothing, who's oppressed by the men who surround her. And it's very, very rarely that we get an unbiased view of what a Muslim woman is and what the role of women is within the context of Islam. So I think that tonight's topic of the role of women in Islam is one that's very relevant, especially in light of the fact that so many people now are interested in learning about Islam and learning about the presence of Islam and of Muslims in America, because we've been here quite literally for hundreds of years. And our presence doesn't seem, at least from my perspective, to have been one that's really been felt in a lot of ways. So I'm hoping that tonight's presentation will sort of illuminate all of us as to what the role of women is within Islam. And we're very pleased to have Sister Aminah Assilmi here with us to share this information with us. The sister is from America. She accepted Islam in 1977, and since then has gone on to become the director of the International Union for Muslim Women. She's lectured at several different Islamic universities. She's very well versed on women and their role within Islam. And we're very happy to have her here with us tonight, and I hope that y'all will join me in welcoming her.
All right. We'll start by saying Assalamu alaikum. This is the greeting that every Muslim gives to each other. It's peace and blessings of God be with you. And we always say it with a smile. We're required to always say it with a smile. All right? And we greet everybody with a smile. Muslim or non, everyone gets greeted with a smile and a greeting of peace. That doesn't mean we go around saying, peace, brother, or anything like that anymore. We mean when we say, hi, how are you? That's a greeting of peace. Hello. It's a greeting of peace. A smile is a greeting of peace. And it's a sunnah, which means the actions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, or his saying that we should always greet people with a smiling countenance. So I greet you with a smile and a greeting of peace. They asked me to come here tonight and talk about women in Islam, but they didn't give me enough time to do it. So I'm going to try and hit just a few points, and we'll try and hit some of the points that there's a lot of confusion about, and see if we can't just, hit the highlights of it here in this brief amount of time we have. So first of all, we have to make sure that you understand, I'm an intelligent, highly educated, thoroughly liberated woman. I am Muslim by choice, not because anyone forced me into it or tried to bring me in through romance or marriage or anything along that line. No. In fact, I learned about Islam when I was trying to convert Muslims to Christianity. That's how I learned about Islam. So I came by choice, based on knowledge. When I first started studying the Quran, as I said, I was studying it to convert Muslims to Christianity. I was just trying to find the ammunition that I could use. One of the first things that hit me was the recognition that in Islam, the woman is not held responsible for original sin. Now, original sin, as I was growing up, had actually been a fairly big deal to me because, the woman was the root of evil. The woman is responsible for herself and her children. She has no responsibility for her husband at all. You could interpret that to mean that the man might possibly hold a higher level of responsibility for original sin because he should have advised Eve not to take that apple. Yeah? Now, I'm not saying that that's true, but it has its merits. And I rather liked it when one of my teachers was explaining it to me that way. I went, all right, give it to the man this time. As I continued to study, another thing that surprised me was that Islam actually orders that the women would be educated. Every Muslim is to be educated. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he set an example. If you read about his wives were all highly educated. Highly educated, and in the case of the first one, also a very successful businesswoman. But we are to seek knowledge unto the ends of the earth, male and female. A prisoner of war was granted his freedom simply for teaching a Muslim, male or female, to read or write. So education was considered very important. Indeed, education it's the path out of poverty. It's the path out of oppression. It's the path to liberation in many ways, because if you can't read and write, you don't have an opportunity to gain the knowledge that is available for you. If you aren't educated, you don't learn the skills that are necessary to really search and find what is true and to see through those things that are false. We continued on in our studies, and I discovered that the woman also had a right to own her own property, to control her own wealth. Now, I grew up under the Napoleonic law, and if you study American history, the Napoleonic law actually has nothing to do with Napoleon. It was an American law that was practiced in almost every state at one time, and when I was married, there were still a lot of states that still had this. And what it said basically was that whatever a man earned was his, whatever his wife had was his. And no matter how much she inherited or earned or anything else, the man was the one who made the decisions as to how it was handled. In fact, It wasn't that far back that a woman had to have a man's signature to have a bank account. You had to have a man's signature to buy or sell property. And yet over 1,400 years ago, God gave the right to woman to control her own property, to earn her own money, to decide what to do with the money. Okay? That's a God-given right. It's not something we earned. It was God-given. But it was something we lost track of. And it was very important that we maintain that. In Islam, the man has 100% financial responsibility for the woman, 100%. Whatever the woman may inherit or earn is hers and hers alone. He has no right to it. He's not even supposed to ask for it. Now, if a woman wants to share, that's fine. There's no problem with that either. But all of the financial responsibility was placed on the man. Now, I've actually heard some people use that as an evidence of inequality between men and women. And if you were to talk to my sons, they agree. It's definitely evidence of inequality. Allah was more generous to woman than he was to man. As far as my sons are concerned, they would like it if everything was 50-50. But they recognize that they will have to take care of not only their wives when they get married, but their children and their sisters and even their mother, because it's their responsibilities as men. They also see the benefit in this, because if the woman does not have to be consumed with earning a living, then the woman is free to choose the most powerful profession in the universe. You know what that is? The one that we don't get paid for, motherhood. Okay? That is the most powerful profession there is. How can I say that? When you don't have any money coming in? It's simple. The first 5 years of a child's life, their mind is like a sponge. They absorb everything they come in contact with. So in the first 5 years of a child's life, we determine their personality. We determine whether they'll be builders or breakers, winners or losers, haters or lovers. That's in our hands. So we have the power to shape the future by what we teach our children. That's power. I'm extra powerful. I raised 32 children. So in those 32 children, I put my influence into what I want the world to become after I'm gone. And through what I put into them, it will go to their children and to their children's children and on down. So I impact on the universe, I impact on the future through motherhood. There's not very many professions that you can say that about. It's a very powerful profession. It also frees us to be able to do a lot of volunteer work and civic work and other things. Now, this doesn't mean that the woman can't work. Indeed, the woman can work at virtually any profession she wants that is permissible. In other words, she's not to earn her living selling alcohol, but then neither is a man. She can't work as a lifeguard at a public swimming pool, but then neither can a Muslim man. What's forbidden to the woman is also forbidden to the man, as far as employment. For both the men, just getting over pneumonia, my voice is not real friendly here, so be patient. Now, both the man and the woman are advised to exercise modesty. And so we're not supposed to be working in a profession where we're going to have unnecessary physical contact with someone of the other gender. That does not mean that I could not be a woman doctor treating male patients, because indeed I could. We have the evidence of this from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He and the others took women into battle with them, and those women functioned as doctors. Many were skilled surgeons, and they provided for the needs of the injured whether they were married to them, related to them, or even knew who they were or not. It did not matter. So that showed that there is nothing wrong with a doctor treating someone of a gender other than what they are. A male doctor can treat female patients, a female can treat male patients. This is permissible. It's true that in some cultures people say, no, haram, haram. But if you turn back to the Sunnah and the Quran, then you have to admit that if the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, accepted it, then it has to be acceptable. Because he never did anything that was wrong, ever, even before he was a Muslim. His character was such that he never did anything that was wrong. Excuse me. Okay. Now we can continue on in the rights that are granted to the woman by Quran and Sunnah, by Islam. And we see that the woman also has a right to choose her own husband. Okay? The marriages are not supposed to be arranged and no consent taken. Always the woman has to be asked, and if the woman doesn't agree, no marriage. Again, it is true that there are some cultures that arrange marriages against the wishes of the children, and the children are forced into them. They can answer to Allah, the creator of the universe, for that on the Day of Judgment, because doing that is wrong by Islamic law. They cannot do that. If you're a parent and you're helping your children to get married, and we have a very important part in that. I know, as a mother, okay? We have to be involved in helping our children make wise decisions. Because sometimes children will work on emotions that are momentary, thinking that they're going to last a lifetime, and they don't. Our purpose as parents is to help our children come to actually know the person they're thinking about getting married to. By asking questions, by writing a marriage contract, if you will, that helps to educate you about each other. Like my son. When my son was thinking about getting married, okay? He had a very, very lovely young lady that he was very interested in. He had been going to school with her since he was in kindergarten, so they'd known each other very, very long. She was absolutely beautiful. She had a full scholarship to Harvard Law School. Okay, full scholarship. That tells you what her academic level was, right? Not very many people get full scholarships to Harvard. She was a straight A student. She was the kind of daughter-in-law that mothers hope for. The kind of mother for my grandchildren that I wanted. But I could foresee some serious problems if she married my son. I love my son very much. But that's one thing about parents. We love our children no matter how many little strange things they do. Okay? If I tried to tell her, don't marry my son, she's not going to listen. If I try to tell my son, don't marry her, he's not going to listen. So I would bring up things that would make them talk about everything. Okay? I knew that my son wanted a wife who would stay at home and raise the children. That's what he wanted. He felt that having a full-time mother was such a special gift that he did not want his children to do without it. He didn't care if he was growing up how poor we were, as long as his mother was at home when he came home from school and he had someone to talk to and that comfort that he needed, that he was on top of the world. He wanted his children to have that. I knew that this young lady was going to be a lawyer first and foremost, and the children would be with babysitters. And that was it. Now, they're young, they're in love, they don't see these problems. And so we have to start writing the marriage contract, and of course my son says, you'll stay at home with the children until they're in school. And she says, oh no, I won't. And the odds of him changing, I couldn't guarantee that. But I could see that this would be something that they would argue about, so we have to bring up this issue, and we talk about how are we going to handle this. And she says, well, he's going to do his own laundry. I'm going to have a career, I don't have time for it. And he says, I don't know how to do clothes. And she says, he's going to wash dishes half the time. He says, I don't think so. You know, and they get into all this stuff, so they start seeing that maybe they have some problems. And they say, well, first they said, I think we should wait for a while before we get married. And then later they decided they shouldn't get married. And that was for the best. Even though she was wonderful and he's wonderful, there were things that they would not have meshed together very well. My son is now married, and he's got somebody who's very suitable to him. Neither one of them are perfect neat freaks, and neither one of them are total slobs. My son's growing up, he's getting much neater. He actually learned how to cook, and he even washes dishes now. What a few years can do to change a man, mashallah. But that's our role as parents, is to help our children know the person they're thinking about getting married to so that they don't make mistakes. Not to form family or political alliances by marrying our children off to this person or that person. That's not Islam. That's not the way it's done. Well, in Islam, as much as a woman is given the right to choose her own husband, she is also given certain protections within the marriage. We already talked about the financial issues. Well, the Quran says that between a husband and a wife, there is to be love, compassion, and a mercy. Now, if you really check out what those words mean, they're very profound. Because when you have love, compassion, mercy between two individuals, that means there will never be any kind of abuse. There cannot be abuse, whether it is physical, verbal, emotional, psychological. It's not a part of Islam. And it's interesting to stop and think that there's actually some people who have this idea that there's a verse of the Quran that gives a man permission to beat his wife. Well, I'm here to tell you there is no verse anywhere in the Quran that gives a man permission to beat his wife. Not one. It's true. There is a verse, an ayah, that limits a man as to when, where, and how he may strike his wife. It is a limitation placed on the man. Before it was revealed, the men would beat their wives as much as they wanted, no problem. Okay? And then the limitation comes and says, no, you can strike your wife only once with something like a toothbrush, and only after doing this, this, and this. That's the limitation. And you can't strike her in the face. The question is, where is the verse in the Quran that limits a woman as to when, where, and how she can strike her husband? There isn't one. Now, this doesn't mean I'm encouraging physical violence on the part of the women. Please understand that. When I said love, compassion, and mercy, once the hand gets involved in violence there's no love, compassion, and mercy between those two people. Then we look at the Prophet Muhammad, who is clarifier, the explainer, the example for us, and try to find even one example of him ever striking a wife. There's not one example of him ever striking any woman, because he never did it. He never struck a child either. He's the example. If we say that we follow the Sunnah, then we have to follow the example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and he never struck a woman. So any man who strikes a woman, know it right here and now, you're not following the Sunnah. You are not. You're going against Quran, and you're not following the Sunnah either. And then we go on to the Day of Judgment. On the Day of Judgment, every part of our body will testify before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as how it was used. So the hand that should be saying, Ya Allah, He used me to give charity and to do good work and to provide comfort. And instead he says, Ya Allah, he used me to abuse his wife and his children. You know, I don't know. I don't think I'd want my hand saying that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Watch it, ladies, because your tongue will also testify as to whether you're nagging your husband. It does. You know, the tongue's to be used for praising, glorifying, and saying good things. It's not for nagging, gossiping, or backbiting. Now we go on from here, all right. She's chosen her own husband. She's guaranteed good abuse, but she's still unhappy with the man. Some people think a woman doesn't have a right to divorce, but that's not true. A woman does have a right to have a divorce anytime she wants to. She can seek divorce. She does not need her husband's permission. It does not need to be in the marriage contract because it's a right that was granted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. During the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, many women came before him seeking divorce, and in every case he granted the divorce. And a couple of them, he tried to convince them to stay with their husband, but when they insisted, then he granted the divorce. They didn't have to prove. In fact, one woman, he asked, if there was a problem with him, and she says, no, he's a very good man, he's a very good provider, he's a very good Muslim. And he says, well, what is the problem? She says, I don't like the way he looks. And he granted the divorce because she didn't like the way he looked, because he could sense that it was going to be very hard to have that love and compassion between two people when one really didn't like the way the other one looked. The divorce was granted. He never argued with them about it. They would question to see whether or not there was any possibility of there being love, compassion, and mercy. And if there wasn't that, then he separated them. And the beautiful thing, see, of all the things that's permissible in Islam, the one that's most hated is divorce. Okay? But in Islam, the way the divorce is so beautiful. This is one of the things that impressed me. I mean, really impressed me. Because in Islam, a divorce has to be amicable. We're not allowed to say anything about the other person except good, even in a divorce. We can't complain about the other person. This is important. It's very important, especially if there are children. Because children have rights too, and children have a right to have both of their parents. If their parents cannot live together with love, compassion, and mercy, then it's better they be separated, but the children should not have to choose between the mother and the father. The children must be free to love the mother and to love the father. This is very important. Because the way it's done here, where we hire the lawyers, and the lawyers try to find, 75 years ago he did this, and find every little bad thing you can come up with and make you hate each other and say awful things to each other. The children are ripped apart. The children are victimized by this. Another really beautiful thing about the divorce system in Islam is that the man is informed very clearly that while he can divorce his wife, he can never divorce his children. He will continue to have 100% financial responsibility for those children, 100% psychological and emotional responsibility for those children. He must still be there for them. He must still be a father, and he must provide everything they need. Not just child support. He must provide everything. And if the woman is able to stay at home, it's better that he would pay her a salary to stay with the children than for her to go out and have to have another job, or for him to hire some stranger to take care of the children. See, the child is protected in Islam. The woman is protected in Islam. The man is protected in Islam. Islam sees to the needs of society at large and to the individual as well. as I was searching and searching through Islam, trying to find, something that I was able to use to prove that Islam was a false religion, all I could find was more evidence that truly this book had to come from God. It could not have come through anything but through the Creator of the universe. It had wisdom and common sense that no one individual could ever possess. It had scientific evidence that wasn't possible for man to know at that time. When I finally admitted that I was a Muslim after 2.5 years of intensive study, I still had a couple of areas where I was not ready to give in. And so when I first took my Shahada, the Shahada is when we bear witness that we're a Muslim. So I said in front of my witnesses, I bear witness there's no God but God. I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God, and I will never cover my hair, and if my husband takes another wife, I'll castrate him. Okay? That's right. I still could not handle the idea of hijab. Hijab, by the way, is the covering of covering the hair and covering the body. It's the way I'm dressed. It's the way the sister here is dressed. The way you see many sisters dressed. Okay? I didn't understand. I didn't understand that, and I still had a lot of vanity. I liked being admired. I expected to be admired. I wasn't sure that I was ready to, go into the woodwork somewhere here. I didn't understand the purpose of hijab. In fact, actually, most Muslims do not understand the purpose of the hijab. Seriously, even Muslims do not know why women cover. When I ask Muslims, why do women cover? And I want to know what the Quran says, I get all kinds of things. And rarely do I get the right answer. You want to know why they cover? It's not for modesty. It's not because there's some precious pearl that they have to be kept safe somewhere. By the way, I have pearls. I wear my pearls. I loan my pearls out. And if you want your wife to be like a pearl, remember that a pearl is cold, unyielding, not very comforting, period. They're only worth looking at, nothing else. So we want more than that out of our spouses. It's not to keep men from being tempted. Remember, we're not responsible for sin. Okay? And we're told that the first look is forgiven and the second is forbidden. So if you look at something and you're tempted by it, don't look at it again. We're told to lower our gaze. Modesty is ordered for both men and women. So why do women cover the way we do? Because Allah gave this to us as a special gift. In the Quran it says to draw our outer garments about us, that we would be recognized as being Muslim. That's why we're covered. We're covered because we're proud of who we are, and we want the world to know that we are Muslim women. Now there's an old saying that says a picture's worth 1,000 words. My hijab says a lot. Especially if you get to know me even this much. Okay? This is a promise to everyone who meets me. It's a promise that I live by Islam, by Quran and Sunnah. That means that I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to cheat, I'm not going to deceive, I'm going to be the best friend you could ever hope for. I'll be the best employer, the best employee that you could ever dream of. The ideal neighbor. It also lets you know that I am a woman of enormous integrity, strength, and courage. Because it takes courage, strength, and integrity to go out dressed extremely different in the world that we live in, and to stand up firmly for what you believe. It's also a warning. That's right, it's also a warning. It's a promise and it's a warning. What stands before you is a Muslim woman. I know my God-given rights, and I will settle for nothing less. I'm not a toy. Don't try to play with me. I'm not for experimentation. I'm not for examination. This is an evidence of who I am. And I like who I am. I don't want to be anyone else. I like who I am. And I'm willing to let you see me straight up for what I am. Now on the other subject, the polygamy, that one took a little bit longer than the hijab did. It took a lot of learning. Okay? And it was actually one of my children that made me understand it for the first time. See, the misconception comes because people think that polygamy was given to men, that Allah gave polygamy to men. Well, see, that's the first mistake right there. Polygamy was a gift from Allah for women, not for men. Remember, the man still has 100% financial responsibility, emotional responsibility, everything for his wife, okay? And when you have two wives, you have to provide for them equally, justly. We don't have two hearts. You have to really worry about being unfair to one wife or the other, okay? So your financial responsibilities are multiplying with each wife you take on, because they all have relatives who could run on hard times and you'd have to step in and help with them. Okay? They also remember that every woman comes with what, a mother-in-law. I'm a mother-in-law, but I'm a good mother-in-law. There are good ones out there. Okay? There's a lot of good ones. We're just hiding. Very few men really want to deal with more than one mother-in-law. Okay? The misconception comes because for some reason people think God only gives things to men. Nothing could be further from the truth. Who benefits from polygamy? A man doesn't. What does a man get? Variety. Please, this is so silly, this idea of variety. If a man is not getting variety with one wife, it's because he doesn't know what he's doing. If he takes two wives, he's just going to do the same thing with the second wife, and he still won't have variety. Okay? Some people think, well, if one's on her period, then he can go visit the other one. Guess what? You get co-wives, and they go on the same cycle. That's right. You don't get it. You don't get it. No. Polygamy was designed for the benefit of the woman. At the time that the limitation came down, and by the way, polygamy is not a requirement of Islam. It's not even encouraged, okay? It is a restriction that the man is only called on to take responsibility for 4 women, no more than that, okay? But it was designed to meet the needs of the woman. See, Islam recognizes that women have rights beyond food, clothing, and shelter. We'll use the word. I've been censored for it before, but I'll use the word again. Women have a right to have sex. We like sex, we need sex, we want sex. There it is. Women are sexual beings too, not just men. And Islam admits this. Islam is very clear about this. Islam is also very clear that we have a right to have our needs met. But in Islam, it is not acceptable for us to have a relationship with someone outside of marriage. Why? Because that is a crime against society. They call it victimless. It's not victimless because it causes problems within the marriage. It causes problems within the society. And we end up with unwed mothers having babies and no fathers taking care of them, and problem after problem after problem just escalates from that. So it's not acceptable to have a relationship outside of marriage. Now we can do it, the way that's most common in monogamous societies, and that is that every man's fair game, whether he's married or not, and we can step out there and, see a good man and take him away from the wife he has. But what does that accomplish? That turns women into enemies to each other. We can't trust each other because we always have to worry that she may be taking our husband. So this isn't good. And besides, it doesn't change the number of women that would be out there without the companionship that they have a right to, that they need. It'd be just a different woman out there, and maybe now some children involved on top of that. Okay, she could live a life of deprivation, but it has been proven that this is both physically and psychologically not healthy for a woman. To live a life of deprivation is not healthy and is not advisable. Or she can find a sister that's got a really good husband, and then she can work out a sharing arrangement to share the husband. And we do, by the way, encourage the sisters that if you have a bad husband, keep him to yourself. Don't share a bad husband. Don't spread him around. In Islam, we want for our sisters that which we want for ourselves, okay? So if you don't want a bad husband for yourself, then that's different. But most of us want a good husband for ourselves, and we should want a good one for our sisters. I wanted to leave some time for question and answer. And you can ask me anything. Really, you can. Okay? I'm way over a half a century in age. I've raised 32 children. After this much, believe me, I've probably heard everything and experienced most things. So you're not going to embarrass me with whatever you may ask. You also are not going to anger or antagonize me because, well, I'm just too blamed happy to get antagonized very easily. I live wrapped up in Allah's love. I'm very confident and I'm very self-assured. So I just don't get upset that much. A little bit now and then because I'm a human being. So, you can ask me anything. Okay, now, the brothers that have the questions, have you got those all organized? And they're going, no, not yet. Just give me one.
The first one deals with the hijab, because the sister talked about how it's an identifying mark for a Muslim woman. And an individual has asked why the men also don't cover themselves, and how are they identified as Muslim in the absence of a covering?
Beards don't say it. I mean, lots of people wear beards, okay? Unless the man is brave enough to wear a kufi on his head or a turban on his head, it'd be really hard to tell whether one's a Muslim or not. Being an Arab doesn't make you a Muslim. Nothing else. So you can't tell a man. Too bad, brothers. Too bad. Maybe women were singled out to represent Islam because maybe we do it better.
The individual asks that if women are equal with men in Islam, then why is it that they're not allowed to become the imam or the leader of a mosque or to lead the prayer at a mosque? And on the other hand, this also deals with the hijab, that on the one hand that they see Muslim women who are dressed modestly and covered up, while Muslim boys and men can dress in shorts, t-shirts, and immodest clothing.
Yeah. How many women are wearing hijab? Huh? See, the women have more courage than the men do when it comes to being identified. As far as this nonsense about the woman being the imam or leading the prayer at the mosque, that's being an imam is nothing really. We choose a person amongst us to lead the prayer, okay? It doesn't make him a better person. He's not going to get any salary for it. He's not going to get necessarily any prestige for it or anything else. He does get an accountability if he makes a mistake in his prayer. This was actually brought to me once when I was having a luncheon with the Pope John Paul, and a bunch of other religious leaders. And one of the bishops said to me, isn't this the evidence of the woman's inferiority in Islam? And I had to tell him, no, it really isn't. The problem is that people put too much importance on titles like priest, preacher, imam, whatever, like that sets you above the rest of humanity, and not enough to the title mother. Okay, and the Pope actually agreed with me. It's not necessary, first of all, to us. We don't see any problems in that. If you want to come right down to it, we can get into some other issues that would bother women a lot. I don't particularly care to pray, thank you, in front of men. I think even when I was young and svelte, that I wouldn't have wanted to prostrate in front of men, because every woman knows that when you're standing you may be this wide, and when you bend over you get this wide. And then because we wear dresses, when we prostrate, there's also that concern, is my dress up or did it get caught, and how much of me is actually exposed back there. And one of the ways that I knew it was time for my youngest son to move up to pray with the men was when I caught him and he's down in prostration doing this routine. And I'm, after the prayer, I'm going, what were you doing? He says, well, I wanted to see if any of the sisters' skirts got caught. And I said, okay, go pray with the men. That's it. Finished. Okay. He lost track. He lost track of the idea of praying because of the fact that he had discovered that sometimes skirts got caught and he could see panties. Okay, he was only 6, but it was a big deal to him, to be able to do this. And so, anyway, we don't want anything distracting our prayer, so we don't want to have to worry about whether our skirts caught up. And we don't want to have to worry about exposing just how wide we are when we're in prostration or anything like that. We'll leave those concerns to men. Men don't like them either, but they have to live with them because they're told to pray in front of us. And so they can be concerned about whether their thobe is caught up or how broad their derriere looks. Okay? We give them that pleasure without any problems. Now, there are occasions when it is permissible for a woman to lead prayers even in front of men. If she is the only one who has the knowledge, then it is permissible for her to lead the prayer even in front of men.
Did you hear about the comments from Pat Robertson? I think it was last Thursday that Pat Robertson made some comments on the news section of the 700 Club, which is broadcast, as we know, nationwide and I think even internationally, dealing with the slant of our foreign policy away from encouraging European immigration to encouraging immigration from Muslim countries, and then essentially Islam was coming here in droves. Essentially, I didn't see it. I read the transcript off something that came across my email, but that because of this slant in our foreign policy, or our immigration policy rather, that we were just rampant with subversive terrorist cells all across America, and that Muslims were very violent, and that he disagreed with President Bush painting the picture of Islam that it was a non-violent, peaceful religion. In fact, I think almost verbatim what he said was that he took issue with our esteemed president with regards to that, and that we were really here to be subversive and to eventually be violent and try to take over or something to that effect. So one of the individuals wants to know what your comment is about the slurrings of Islam, specifically with regards to this question, with regards to Pat Robertson, but I think that actually that could even be expanded to really the enormous smear campaign that's been conducted against Muslims since September 11th.
First of all, most of the Muslims in this country are not immigrants anymore. At one time, that's true. At one time, most of the Muslims were immigrants. Now, most of the Muslims are actually Americans or Americans. I'm Irish and Cherokee. I didn't immigrate to this. Most of you guys came and immigrated, okay? Whether you're Muslim or not. Your relatives immigrated here. Mine didn't. Well, one of mine did. The Irish did. Islam is not a violent religion by any chance. We did not spread Islam by the sword, but by the example. Yes, there are some people who have committed some serious atrocities, whether 9/11 is one of them or not. There are others that have been committed by Muslims. Those acts are against Islam. Let me explain to you about jihad, because jihad or holy war is bandied about all the time in conjunction with Muslims. The jihad in Islam, the jihad that's talked about the most, okay, is an internal struggle. So that's the struggle, that's the jihad that we have to deal with all the time. All right, now when we're talking about the jihad where you bear arms, that's very different. That one has very strict rules and regulations involved in it. Okay, number one, you have to warn the people that you're going to attack before you attack. Okay? So I can't walk up to this brother and hit him over the head with a 2x4. No, I have to walk up to this brother and say, excuse me, brother, but you really made me angry and I'm going to hit you with a 2x4. Now, once I've told him I'm going to come hit him with a 2x4, what do you think he's going to do? Say, okay, go ahead? No. He's going to pick up his own 2x4 and defend himself. Well, this is Islam. I got to warn somebody. I can't just, go and do something like these acts of terrorism, like car bombs and stuff like that. Another thing is that you can never injure a person who is not actively involved in fighting. Actively involved in fighting. You cannot injure a man, a woman, or a child who is not actively involved in fighting. And believe me, in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, there were women who were actively involved in fighting, and they did take on a lot of injuries as they were doing. I mean, we had women who were archers and everything. But you can't kill, you can't injure an innocent person. So now we have to warn him, and you can't injure an innocent person, a person not involved in the conflict. And I've never figured out how you can kill someone without injuring them. You can't. You can't kill someone without injuring them. And it's so explicit, it says that you can't injure the person who is not bearing arms. Just those two rules alone are enough to show you that no act of terrorism is permissible in Islam. And they talk about these guys are doing it because they believe that they're going to have 700 beautiful virgins waiting for them in heaven if they do these acts. Well, what they get is going to be in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I'm glad I'm not the one that gets to choose it for them. But they are murderers, and their reward will be the reward of a murderer. They are not a martyr. Not if they commit an act of terrorism. They're not a martyr. There's no martyrism in that. That's murder. And Allah will punish them. As soon as you are making one group of people suspicious about another group of people, you have become the cause of war. No matter who you are, if you are spreading hate or mistrust, then you are the cause of war. Because that's how war begins. If you don't understand someone, you're afraid of them. If you're going to mistrust them, you're going to be afraid. And that's where war begins. So, these people who are spreading this stuff, whether it's Oral Roberts, Jerry Falwell, Pat Roberts, okay, they are warmongers. It's the only way to describe it.
I mean, one of the questioners asked about why is it that in some Muslim countries women aren't allowed to work or to drive or visit cemeteries, and really one of the questions, why aren't the women openly voicing their rights in other countries where they are repressed, in light of the fact that they would know what their rights are within Islam?
I'm really, whoever wrote that, they need to tell me what country they're talking about, because to my knowledge there's no Muslim country where women are just not allowed to work. Even Saudi Arabia, who doesn't allow women to drive and allows non-Muslim women to wear hijab, women work. We have, over there's women banks and women's universities, and the women are the presidents of those banks, and they run those banks and the universities. I produced a series of television shows over there. Several of my friends are producers and directors and on-air personalities for different television programs, in Saudi Arabia. But they don't let women drive. But I tell you what, take a trip over there and see the way the men drive. Excuse me, but I want to be in the back seat, away from the crash zone as much as possible. They just traffic laws don't mean much. Speed limit, that's how far does your foot go to the metal here? My son called it half horn will travel. The louder the horn, the faster you can travel. That's people hold that up as signs, and there have been protests, and there are a lot of people that recognize that that's not an Islamic law, it's a cultural law, okay? If we say, well, we can't drive a car because women didn't drive cars during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, then neither did men. And both men and women could drive camels, which was the mode of transportation in those days. Both men and women rode horses, which was one of the modes of transportation in those days. So, just because it's being done in an Islamic country does not mean that it is necessarily representative of what Islam is. There's no country that's perfect in their following of Islam. Not perfect. Many times when Muslim women do speak out and demand their rights, other people take and twist it around, okay? Women in Turkey were fighting for the right to be allowed to wear the hijab, and it was twisted around that a smaller group of women were fighting to keep from having to wear the hijab, where the ones in Turkey weren't saying everybody wear it. They're just saying, look, I want to teach at the university, I want to go to the university, and I want to wear hijab. And they can't. People wear beards, okay? Unless the man is brave enough to wear a kufi on his head or a turban on his head, it'd be really hard to tell whether one's a Muslim or not. Being an Arab doesn't make you a Muslim. Nothing else. So you can't tell a man. Too bad, brothers. Too bad. Maybe women were singled out to represent Islam because maybe we do it better.
The individual asks that if women are equal with men in Islam, then why is it that they're not allowed to become the imam or the leader of a mosque or to lead the prayer at a mosque? And on the other hand, I mean, this also deals with the hijab, that on the one hand that they see Muslim women who are dressed modestly and covered up, while Muslim boys and men can dress in shorts, T-shirts, and immodest clothing.
Yeah. How many women are wearing a hijab? Huh? See, the women have more courage than the men do when it comes to being identified. As far as this nonsense about the woman being the imam or leading the prayer at the mosque, that's being an imam is nothing really. We choose a person amongst us to lead the prayer, okay? It doesn't make him a better person. He's not going to get any salary for it. He's not going to get necessarily any prestige for it or anything else. He does get an accountability if he makes a mistake in his prayer. This was actually brought to me once when I was having a luncheon with the Pope John Paul, and a bunch of other religious leaders. And one of the bishops said to me, isn't this the evidence of the woman's inferiority in Islam? And I had to tell him, no, it really isn't. The problem is that people put too much importance on titles like priest, preacher, imam, whatever. Like that sets you above the rest of humanity. And not enough to the title mother. Okay? And the Pope actually agreed with me. It's not necessary, first of all, to us. We don't see any problems in that. If you want to come right down to it, we can get into some other issues that would bother women a lot. I don't particularly care to pray, thank you, in front of men. I think even when I was young and svelte, that I wouldn't have wanted to prostrate in front of men, because every woman knows that when you're standing you may be this wide, and when you bend over you get this wide. And then because we wear dresses, when we prostrate, it's actually exposed back there. And one of the ways that I knew it was time for my youngest son to move up to pray with the men was when I caught him and he's down in prostration doing this routine. And I'm, after the prayer, I'm going, what were you doing? He says, well, I wanted to see if any of the sisters' skirts got caught. And I said, okay, go pray with the men. That's it. Finished. Okay. He lost track. He lost track of the idea of praying because of the fact that he had discovered that sometimes skirts got caught and he could see panties. Okay, he was only 6, but it was a big deal to him, to be able to do this. And so we have to worry about whether our skirts caught up, and we don't want to have to worry about exposing just how wide we are when we're in prostration or anything like that. We'll leave those concerns to men. Men don't like them either, but they have to live with them because they're told to pray in front of us. And so they can be concerned about whether their thobe is caught up or how broad their derriere looks. Okay? We give them that pleasure without any problems. Now, there are occasions when it is permissible for a woman to lead prayers. If it is knowledge, then it is permissible for her to lead the prayer, even in front of men.
Did you hear about the comments from Pat Robertson? I think it was last Thursday that Pat Robertson made some comments on the news section of the 700 Club, which is broadcast, as we know, nationwide, and I think even internationally, dealing with to encouraging immigration from Muslim countries, and that essentially Islam was coming here in droves, essentially. I didn't see it. I read the transcript off of something that came across my email. But that because of this slant in our foreign policy or our immigration policy rather, that we were just rampant with subversive terrorist cells all across America, and that Muslims were not a peaceful religion. In fact, I think almost verbatim what he said was that he took issue with our esteemed president with regards to that, and that we were really here to be subversive and to eventually be violent and try to take over or something to that effect. So one of the individuals wants to know what your comment is about the slurrings of Islam, specifically with regards to this question, with regards to Pat Robertson, but I think that actually that could even be expanded to really the enormous smear campaign that's been conducted against Muslims since September 11th.
First of all, most of the Muslims in this country are not immigrants anymore. At one time, that's true. At one time, most of the Muslims were immigrants. Now, most of the Muslims are actually Americans or Americans. I'm came and immigrated, okay? Whether you're Muslim or not, your relatives immigrated here. Mine didn't. Well, one of mine did. The Irish did. Islam is not a violent religion. Yes, there are some people who have committed some serious atrocities, whether 9/11 is one of them or not. There are others that have been committed by Muslims. Those acts are against Islam. Let me explain to you about jihad, because jihad or holy war is bandied about all the time in conjunction with Muslims. The jihad in Islam, the jihad that's talked about the most, okay, is an internal struggle. So that's the struggle, that's the jihad that we have to deal with all the time. All right, now when we're talking about the jihad where you bear arms, that's very different. That one has very strict rules and regulations involved in it. Okay, number one, you have to before you attack. Okay? So I can't, walk up to this brother and hit him over the head with a 2x4. No, I have to walk up to this brother and say, excuse me, brother, but you really made me angry and I'm going to hit you with a 2x4. Now, once I told him I'm going to hit him with a 2x4, what do you think he's going to do? Say, okay, go ahead? No. He's going to pick up his own 2x4 and defend himself. Well, this is Islam. I got to warn somebody. I can't just, go and do something like these acts of terrorism, like car bombs and stuff like that. Another thing is that you can never injure a person who is not actively involved in fighting. Actively involved in fighting. You cannot injure a man, a woman, or a child who is not actively involved in fighting. And believe me, in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, there were women who were actively involved in fighting, and they did take on a lot of injuries as they were doing. I mean, we had women who were archers and everything. But you can't you can't injure an innocent person. So now we have to warn him, and you can't injure an innocent person, a person not involved in the conflict. And I've never figured out how you can kill someone without injuring them. You can't. You can't kill someone without injuring them. And it's so explicit, it says that you can't injure the person who is not bearing arms. Just those two rules alone are enough to show you that no act of terrorism is permissible in Islam. And they talk about these guys are doing it because they believe that the acts. Well, what they get is going to be in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I'm glad I'm not the one that gets to choose it for them. But they are murderers, and their reward will be the reward of a murderer. They are not a martyr. Not if they commit an act of terrorism. They're not a martyr. There's no martyrism in that. That's murder. And Allah will punish them. As soon as you are making one group of people suspicious about another group of people, you have become the cause of war. no matter who you are, if you are spreading hate or mistrust, then you are the cause of war, because that's how war begins. If you don't understand someone, you're afraid of them. If you're going to mistrust them, you're going to be afraid. So these people who are spreading this stuff, whether it's Oral Roberts, Jerry Falwell, warmongers, it's the only way to describe it.
I mean, one of the questioners asked about why is it that in some Muslim countries women aren't allowed to work or to drive or visit cemeteries, and really one of the questions, why aren't the women openly voicing what their rights are within Islam?
I'm really, whoever wrote that, they need to tell me what country they're talking about, because to my knowledge there's no Muslim country where women are just not allowed to work. Even Saudi Arabia, who doesn't allow women to drive and allows non-Muslim women to wear hijab, women work. We have, over there's women's banks and women's universities, and the women president of those banks and the run of banks and the universities. I produced a series of television shows over there. Several of my friends are producers and directors and on-air personalities for different television programs, in Saudi Arabia. But they don't let women drive. But I tell you what, take a trip over there and see the way the men drive. Excuse me, but I want to be in the back seat, away from the crash zone as much as possible. They just, traffic laws don't mean much. Speed limit, that's how far does your foot go to the metal here? My son called it half horn will travel. The louder the horn, the faster you can travel. That's people hold that up as signs, and there have been protests, and there are a lot of people that recognize that that's not an Islamic law, it's a cultural law, okay? If we say, well, we can't drive a car because women didn't drive cars during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, then neither did men. And both men and women could drive camels, which was the mode of transportation. So, just because it's being done in an Islamic country does not mean that it is necessarily representative of what Islam is. Many times when Muslim women do speak out and demand their rights, other people take and twist it around, okay? Women in Turkey were fighting for the right to be allowed to wear the hijab, and it was twisted around that a smaller group of women were fighting to keep from having to wear the hijab, where the ones in Turkey weren't saying everybody wear it, they're just saying, look, I want to teach at the university, I want to go to the university, and I want to wear hijab, and they can't. Happened the same way in Algeria a few years back. Women were fighting to be allowed to wear the hijab. And the way it was reported here was they were fighting against it. You look in Pakistan, we have the same problem. Women are fighting, but sometimes the governments will become more oppressive, and sometimes, unfortunately, it has to do with politics and appeasing the superpower that's known as America. That, especially in the issues of hijab, where the women want very much to wear it, the governments forbid it because they think it makes the country look backwards. How does a woman being allowed to be liberated and stand up straight and tall and say who she is and what she believes, how does that make a country look backwards? I don't know. I think it looks more backwards to try and lie about who you are and what you believe and what you want to be.
And this happened actually for years before we started the bombing campaign in Afghanistan, that many people in America really came out for Muslim women in Afghanistan, and there were really many advocacy organizations that I was aware of that were working for to assist, I guess, the women in Afghanistan. But one of the things that the questioner asked is that people are coming out for the Muslim women who are oppressed in Afghanistan, but at the same time here, women are exploited as sex objects, and they're wondering where the outcry is from Western women, from American and European women, against exploitation by pornography, against exploitation by not being allowed to wear your clothes and still, and be able to be respected as a woman, as a person.
But there's other kinds of exploitation of women that occurs in the and forced to leave their children while they go out to work. You find our children being what they call latchkey children, who come home to an empty apartment and have to hide in their apartment until their mother's able to come home because there's no man around. So the woman and the child is oppressed because the men don't take on their responsibilities as husbands and fathers. Women are oppressed, children are oppressed because sexual intercourse is perfectly accepted between individuals, whether they're married or not. And the outcry is not there. We don't talk about the poverty. We don't talk about the women who are beaten to death by their husbands. You don't talk about our children who are being molested. We hide it. There's oppression of women and children everywhere in the world, no matter what religion you follow. And to deny it is to deny what is true.
What is the financial responsibility?
Is hers to keep, unless she is the one who sought the divorce. And if she sought the divorce, then he may ask for it back, although it's considered better not to because of the fact that you've already been with her. Once you are divorced, okay, there is no more responsibility, okay, because the male members of her family are expected to pick up the responsibility from that point. Now, the exception to that is during the period of waiting, then he's still 100% responsible, and also if the wife should be pregnant, he will be 100% responsible for her, not only through the pregnancy, but through 2 years of pregnancy.
Setting a finger at Islam about women, but the questioner is aware that the Bible says really many degrading things about women, and they give some examples of some scriptural verses to support that. And they'd like to know if you can comment on the Quran and Bible perspectives concerning women.
So, when I bring up any scriptures at all, it's not because I'm talking bad about another religion, but bringing up the fact that perhaps people may not be aware. So I'll just give a couple of examples that I can give off the top of my head. Both of them are in 2 Corinthians. I'd have to look up the actual verse number for you. One of them says, God did not create confusion, therefore have your women remain silent in the church. If they would gain religious knowledge, have them wait in their homes until their husbands return to teach them. So according to the Bible, New Testament, there aren't any women preachers. Women aren't allowed to speak inside the church. In fact, the best thing is for them to stay at home. New Testament. Okay, there's another verse that is also in 2 Corinthians, and it says, if a woman prays without having her head covered, her hair should be shorn. In other words, her head should be shaved. So, even the New Testament says that women must cover their hair when they pray. And they punish it pretty seriously. Get caught one time praying without your hair covered, and they have the right to shave your head to mark you. And that's rough. There's always a way of trying to take and point fingers of bad things here or bad things there, okay? But the truth of it is that all religions come from one God because there is only one God. The purpose of religion is to help us to draw closer to the Creator of the universe. The purpose of religion was never to divide us. It was never to be used as a weapon against each other, or walls or barriers to keep us apart from each other. The purpose of religion is to help you to draw closer to the Creator of the universe, to help you to live your life in a better way. And in Islam, we know that every religion has that grain of truth in it, because every religion did come originally from the same God. That's why you find so many similarities between religious beliefs. I would love to see all human beings follow their own religious text to perfection, because we wouldn't be fighting each other anymore at all.
The questioner would like to know about the law of inheritance that gives 2 shares for men and 1 for women, and how that can be understood.
A woman gets 1/2 of what a man gets. That's true. Absolutely. Ask my sons whether they think it's fair. They will say, no, it's not fair to them. Why? Because out of my son's share, he must see to his sister as well. You know, if something happens, then he has to take care of her and her children. All right? But if something happens with him, my daughter's not obliged to do anything for her brother, although I'm sure she would. I hope so anyway. I hope they love each other enough that they would be there for each other, but the man has earned income. You didn't do anything to deserve this inheritance. It's more of a gift. The need is greater. So since this is not earned income, and make it clear that under earned income, there's equality there. There's total equality. The worker is to be paid their due before the sweat is dried on their brow. It does not say women get paid half of what a man does. It says the worker is paid their due, regardless of their gender. Inheritance is mapped out so beautifully in Islam as a whole, okay? Because every person is dealt with as to who gets what. This is very important, because families cannot be torn apart arguing over who gets how much. And families cannot be unjust to their children, because it already says this is how it's going to be. So it helps families a lot. The one thing that amazes me is that while people are quick to say, but the woman gets half of what a man does, forgetting that the man has 100% financial responsibility. Hey, this is a book that 1,400 years ago said that women had a right to inherit. Think about that. 1,400 years ago, women were given the right to inherit. Things like the Eve stamp, that was us. We did that. Not all by ourselves. We had the help of 10,000 children, and several other Islamic organizations finally pitched in there at the end. But there's a lot of work that we try to get done, and the only way we have of doing it is through the sale of this material. The book is called Giving Your Children the Power of Islam. Anyone who has babies needs this book. Anyone who's thinking about getting married, doesn't have children, read the book before you get married. All right? We'll see you back in about 5.
I want to know what sort of response you got when you told your family that you converted. What response did you get from your family, your husband, and your friends? Did you feel that they were supportive or very hostile to this decision?
Were they supportive? I don't know. My mother wasn't exactly supportive, but she was probably the most generous when she said, oh, ignore it, it's just a phase, she'll outgrow it. You know, it'll go away. My sister, the psychologist, arranged to have me committed to a mental institute. She was very sure I'd lost my sanity to go from being a feminist to being a Muslim. My father, the jovial clown, is the kind of man that 5 minutes with him and everything. He loaded a double-barrel shotgun and headed up to Colorado to kill me. which he considered being merciful because he was keeping me from going deeper into hell. Catch me while I'm on the lip, and maybe I won't have to stay there so long. So it was, he was supportive in that, that he didn't want me to go into the lowest levels of hell. No, I would not say that my family was supportive. Okay. My husband and I ended up in divorce. Children were all taken away from me. I was granted 5 weeks out of the year of visitation, which was supervised, during which time I could not expose them to Islam in any way. I do have to let you know that situation didn't exactly stay that way. My family didn't stay unsupportive. In fact, within the first year, my grandmother had taken Shahada. Within 5 years, my mother and my father and my stepfather had all taken Shahada. And as time went on, more and more members of my family also came to Islam. My ex-husband, who took my children away, also embraced Islam. It took him 16 years, but he also embraced Islam. Is my family supportive of me now? Oh, absolutely. The only thing they wish is that during the Iranian hostage situation, when they pushed me to start using a different name so that they wouldn't suffer discrimination, now they want me to go back and use that name. I said, but nobody knows who that is, Mom. I'm sorry. I am Aminah Assilmi now, and that's all I can ever be. Allah has been very, very generous with me in bringing so many members of my family to Islam. I think the one that hit my heart the most was when they came and took him away from me, and it was extremely painful for me. Having all the children taken away was very painful. But that child in particular, they used to say we breathe the same breath. Okay? He had some problems when he was born, and so I was probably closer to him because of those problems and the surgery. He called me and said, Mom, I've thought about it a lot. I've done a lot of research. I've looked into all the other religions. And he says, Mom, I want to be a Muslim. So when he was 4, in the court, the judge had said to me that I would have to choose, that I could choose Islam, and instead I said I would leave my children in the hands of Allah. Allah held my son safely for me, and then on his 21st birthday he returned to me better.
How are practicing Muslim women, and that's actually the adverb that they use, how are practicing women treated if they choose not to wear the hijab and pants outside of the mosque? And they're wondering, is that person then seen as less devout or less orthodox? And then I had another question earlier that dealt with whether or not hijab was a compulsory thing, something that Muslim women needed to do.
I consider it compulsory. Absolutely. The hijab is compulsory. Will I ever judge another Muslim for not wearing it? No, I will not. One of the attributes of Allah is that He is the judge. It is not for me to judge anyone. I should not be harsh to them because I don't know what's inside of them, and Allah does. And Allah says that the worst amongst you today may be the best tomorrow. We make a big mistake because I have to admit that it is true that some Muslims do judge women who don't wear hijab. It's something that must be done for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I wear the hijab, I'm not playing Halloween or dress up, and it has no value. The problem has been that for too long people have been taught they should wear it for modesty or to protect themselves from being molested or stuff like that. And I think I was pretty clear that that's not correct. Okay? No matter what you put on, it's not going to keep you from being raped, because rape has nothing to do with sex. It's an act of violence and hate. It's not an act of sex. Do not judge each other and do not be harsh with each other regardless of whether you wear hijab or not, because Allah and Allah alone knows that on the day of judgment where each one of you is going to be, and it may be the one who does not have the hijab on will be in a higher level of heaven than even the one with the niqab. You can't know that. But for those of you who don't wear the hijab, for the true believer, if Allah says to do it, that should be enough.
Do you think that a lot of the Islamic thought and jurisprudence is still open to interpretation and reinterpretation? Because historically it's been Muslim men who have been given, and they say, the sole privilege of interpretation. My learning of Islam is that Muslim men have not been the only interpreters of Islamic law, that there have been historically many female scholars of Islamic law. So I'd just like to say the sole privilege of interpretation is really a statement from the questioner.
Do I go along with their idea of reinterpretation? No, I don't. Okay? There's a lot of things that they want to change because they don't understand Quran and Sunnah themselves. They are reacting to cultural experiences that they had. And they are really just reacting to those experiences. They don't understand that those experiences that they had in their homelands were contrary to Islam from the beginning. If they have the true knowledge of Quran and Sunnah, they would see that the Quran and Sunnah does not need to be reinterpreted from a feminist direction, because that would be lowering it. That would be providing less for women than what is already provided. I would love to have a chance to meet those three women, okay, by the way, and all three of them have refused to be on a panel with me. Inshallah, the day will come, but I disagree with them. I have to. Them and other players.
One of the questioner wants to know is how you feel about the way that Muslim women are treated in Afghanistan, and what basis do you think they have?
Because what they're asking about is about the Taliban and what was done under the Taliban. Okay, the International Union of Muslim Women had many discussions with members of the Taliban party in trying to make them see that what they were doing was contrary to Islamic law, regardless of what they do. People do things and say they're doing it in the name of Islam. It just doesn't necessarily make it so. Okay, what they did in regards to the women in Afghanistan was wrong. But I think it could have occurred there. All right? Many of you are so young that you won't remember the struggle that Afghanistan had in fighting the USSR, which no longer exists, because they couldn't beat the Afghanis. And when the Afghanis were fighting against the USSR, there was a transformation that occurred in media and politics within this country. At first they were called rebels. And then as the U.S. saw that there was some benefit in backing them, then they became freedom fighters. And that gave it permission that we were all able to, support the freedom fighters in Afghanistan that were fighting the ugly red plague of communism. But as soon as the Russians had pulled out, America dropped Afghanistan. We didn't go in there and help to rebuild Afghanistan, which had been totally destroyed. The buildings were destroyed. There's no schools, no hospitals, no nothing. They left the people out there with nothing. And then along comes a very charismatic leader who's offering a level of security to them. And of course they're going to listen. My concern right now is that yes, now the Taliban is not in power in Afghanistan, but what are we as Muslims and as Americans going to do to make sure that there's housing there, that there's schools there, that there's opportunities for them to thrive and survive? Because it's in our hands at this point.
The woman here, and I hope she is still here because I didn't get to this question before, who's a Christian woman who would like to travel to the Middle East, and she wants to know in terms of how she would blend in and there, and whether or not, out of respect for the Muslims and as the Muslim culture there, whether or not she should wear a hijab. Is that something that would be acceptable for her, and where would she go about finding one?
One of the things that I have always learned as I traveled was to always respect the culture of the country that I was visiting. And so I'm always very respectful of the culture of the country that I am visiting. I don't try to Americanize anyone or Westernize anyone or even Islamicize anyone. And I would recommend that for anyone traveling anywhere, is to respect the culture that you visit.
They want to know whether or not polygamy is a sin or not.
What?
Is a sin.
What?
Polygamy.
Polygamy?
Yes. I mean, that's the question.
Of course polygamy is not a sin. However, the way that some people practice polygamy is absolutely a sin.
For contraception in Islam, what are the guidelines for that? And we're moving down. I mean, well, these are things that I think people are probably interested in. I mean, someone just at work the other day asked me about contraception in Islam.
Well, if you want to contact me through the internet, I'll give you the full title of the book, because I don't remember what it's called, but it's by Muhammad al-Bar, who lives in Jeddah, I believe. And it's the most excellent, most comprehensive book that I've seen written on the subject of birth control.
When you were talking, you were mainly focusing on the women and a woman's right to divorce. And so the questioner wants to know if the man also has a right to divorce, and on what sorts of grounds, I guess, is the divorce acceptable. They say, why is divorce acceptable?
It's a law. And the divorce is the thing that's most hated amongst those things that are permitted. Where a man can come in and say, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you, and you're divorced. Okay? Doesn't work that way. What you have to do is the man has to wait until the woman has had a period and he has not had any contact with her and she's clean from the period, then he pronounces one divorce. And then he has to wait until again she has a second period and is clean from that, and then he pronounces the second divorce, and the same thing on the third. Then they're divorced. But during that time, he must treat her with love and compassion and mercy and continue to provide for her. The rights are there for the man to have a divorce as much as the woman, and the reasons, sorry about that, the reasons doesn't matter, okay? It's just that you don't feel you can live with love, compassion, and mercy with each other. That's the reason.
We were just really happy that y'all were all able to come, and thank you very much. I think that will conclude our program for this evening.
We really appreciate thank you.
Thank you for having me.
That beautiful, this wonderful lady.
Jazakallah khairan. I will take advantage of the prerogative of the microphone. All praises for Allah. So, if any errors were made, any mistakes were made, they were made by a human being. I ask you to forgive me for those. But if any good came, that good came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is He who you should praise. Clapping your hands, you're taking my barakah away from me. If you want to praise me, I'll say don't. Praise Allah. Thank Allah. And the only way to praise me is to praise Allah. Thank you.